Years ago, I knew a young man who was so good looking, but so haughty and so standoffish because of his looks that everyone called him the Ice Prince. He was utterly unattainable. He knew it too. I mean, he knew how he looked and what he looked like. And so he had removed himself so everybody could just gaze upon him. Years later, I saw him again, maybe 20, 25 years later, and Ice Prince had melted. He had turned into somebody that was almost desperate for attention, but not the same attention he had when he was young, sort of ingratiating and trying to befriend everyone. But it seemed that wasn't working anymore, and he had descended into quite a dark place. I bring it up because I wanted to talk about a painting that is one of the treasures of the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and it is called Madame X.
When you pass through the American Wing at the Metropolitan Museum, you'll pass many paintings that are obviously American, and then you'll come to one that appears strangely, je ne sais quoi, French. Look at the way she's standing. It's a kind of an awkward pose with her hand in a strange, sort of tense way. And the other hand holding up the dress and also holding a fan. I never saw that before until I gazed at the picture in person. You also saw a glint of wedding band. And look at the reflection of light on that table. Just one, almost a dry brush slash. The same with the dress. Very simple, easy, confident strokes that show the reflection of light on that fabric. He reserved most of his interest and time and detail on that magnificent face.
Now, I'm going to spend a little time on the background of this story because it involves scandal. Who doesn't like scandal? It was painted in 1884 by the American painter John Singer Sargent. He was an American, but he was born in Florence, Italy, and he spent most of his life in Europe, but we still claim it as ours.
He was quite young then, only about 27. And he had hopes of becoming the greatest portrait painter of the age. He would become that in time. But right then, at 27 years old in Paris, he was casting about for the perfect subject that would put him on the map.
At the same time, there was a young woman, 25, named Virginie Amélie Gautreau. She was also an American, born in New Orleans. Her father was killed at the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War, and her mother packed up little 8-year-old Virginie Amélie and moved to Paris. She became a great beauty, renowned through Paris. She married a banker, Pierre Gautreau, and Pierre was quite a bit older and quite a bit less attractive than Virginie. And this allowed her to have affairs. When I say this allowed her to have affairs, I read somewhere, this is a very interesting thing, is you really weren't allowed to have affairs in Paris until you were married. You had to be pure until the marriage night, and then you could fool around all you wanted. Everyone wanted to paint her. And you can see why. There's really only one photograph of her young, but you can see the sharp nose. She always had her painting, her portrait, and her photos done in profile. She would go to the beach, and people would gather on the beach to watch her come out of the water to see if the tone of her skin had changed, the color. because she was famous for having this pallor, this extremely white skin that she highlighted by wearing lavender powder, and she put henna in her hair. She was quite the provocateuress. She was approached many times by many artists. Please let us paint you. Please let me paint you. I want to paint you. No, monsieur, no. She would not allow anyone to paint her. John Singer Sargent pursued her. Normally he was pursued to paint. Please paint my wife. But he wanted to paint her. He had a feeling that if he painted her, this would be the painting that really made him. So he did everything he could. Like I said, she refused to sit for any paintings. John Sargent knew a gentleman named Dr. Samuel Pozzi. He was a renowned surgeon and gynecologist in Paris. He was renowned for two things: his great good looks and his great love of lovemaking. John Singer Sargent actually painted him, and here he is in a scarlet robe. He was known by his paramours and his patients, often the same thing, as Dr. Love. He had many affairs, including with Sarah Bernhardt and with Virginie Gautreau. One little sad note about Dr. Pozzi. In 1918, a man had come to him that he had operated on and insisted that the operation caused impotence. And he insisted that Dr. Pozzi do another operation to reverse it. And Dr. Pozzi said, "I'm sorry, it's impossible." And the guy pulled out a pistol and shot him 4 times in the stomach. So John Sargent goes, "Hey, Dr. Pozzi, would you please approach Madame Gautreau? I know could you please approach her and ask if she would sit for me? I want to do a painting." So he did. And she agreed. And she was not the easiest subject. She was a terrible model. She was just fidgety and hated sitting for a long time. And she had all kinds of social engagements. And so it was a long process for him. But he finally came up with the painting we know as Portrait of Madame X. It was called Portrait of Madame Gautreau originally. And when it was finished, Sargent and Madame Gautreau loved it. They were both thrilled with it. They both thought for sure that it was going to do the thing that they both hoped for, put them at the top of society, both as a painter and as a socialite. Well, quite the opposite happened. When it was unveiled at the Salon in Paris in 1884, it caused a huge uproar, an absolute scandal. One reason is because Sargent painted one of the straps on her gown down over her shoulder. This is a picture of it originally, which I love. And I'm so sad he changed it. But he changed it because the critics were so terrible. I guess it was fine to show nudes in mythological scenes as long as they were pure and almost inhuman. But it was quite another to depict Madame Gautreau in a style that showed some indiscretion, that actually showed the real character of Madame Gautreau, meaning her as an adulteress. So the critics were savage, and it was said that if you stood in front of it, you could hear every curse word in Paris. Isn't this tragic? I mean, sometimes, I almost always think critics are wrong. Even when they're right, they're wrong. They never quite get things right. And so often in art, the very painting or sculpture that critics most detest and most go crazy over are the ones that turn out to be masterpieces, and the ones that turn out to be the painting that is the artist is most known for. Well, that's the case with this one. It was just a scandal. John Sargent also, he changed the name to Portrait of Madame X. Well, everybody knew who she was, so that was ridiculous. He repainted that strap. Madame Gautreau approached him in tears, begged him to remove the painting from the salon, and her mother did too. And he wouldn't. I don't blame him. He knew he was right, but it had a terrible effect on him and an even worse effect on her. Portrait commissions dried up, and Sargent left Paris essentially for good. He moved to London and eventually became the preeminent portrait artist of his day. Madame Gautreau at 25, I can't say her life was over, but she never quite recovered from this scandal. She withdrew to Brittany, to her chateau. She no longer became the socialite in Paris, and certainly did not become the socialite in Paris she had hoped to become. As she grew older, she began to embrace the image of the Sargent painting. She had another 2 or 3 paintings done and would have the strap down. But by that time, society had moved on and there was no longer any interest in her. She became a recluse, and sometime when she was in her early 40s, she went to the south of France and overheard 2 women talking about her and saying how tragic it was that she lost her looks. Now, I think we can all agree that she probably did not lose her looks in her early 40s. She was devastated, and she went back to her chateau and she covered all the mirrors. She never went out except at night. She would walk along the beach where people had gathered to once watch her come out of the water to see if it had affected her skin. But now she walked alone with a veil over her face. She had become the ice prince that I told you about, the prince who had melted. She could not get over the loss of her looks and could not accept her looks as a lady in her 40s. And later she died at 56, but I'm sure she could never have accepted that either. And so tragic, isn't it? That everything is just back in youth. That's where all your sense of identity and self-worth comes from, something that is not going to last. Now, the painting itself, once it was, the Salon of 1884 ended, John Singer Sargent took that painting and he kept it out of public view for years and years and years. He never showed it again. People offered to buy it, but he would never sell it. And finally, late in his life, he wrote to the Metropolitan Museum in New York and offered to sell it to them, saying that it is probably the best work I've ever done. I'm inclined to agree with that. They bought it for $8,200, and it is now in the museum and is one of the favorites. It's certainly one of my favorites. I think when you turn that corner and you see Madame Gautreau, it's breathtaking. Even if you don't know anything about the painting, you don't know who she is, you don't know who painted it, that pose, the way the hand is on the desk and holding her dress with the other hand, it's the tension in it and that haughty stare out of the frame. And now this painting is all we have left of Madame X, the Ice Queen, caught in paint as if preserved in actual ice. The real Madame Gautreau is lost to us now. Even her name is lost. She's become the anonymous Madame X. But we still have her here in this painting, forever young, forever beautiful, and caught at a moment of supreme haughtiness and confidence that her youth and beauty would never fade, and having no idea how wrong she was.